Lasagne was the last meal I cooked for him. We sat in silence in the kitchen, as per usual. He scoffed down his food, belched a little, and then took out his phone. He didn't thank me for making his tea. But that was the custom. It would have been more unusual if he did.
He huffed before grunting. Is the internet down again? I don't know, I replied as I sipped my tea. Did you enjoy your meal? He didn't look up. His eyes were firmly fixed on his phone as he angrily tapped away at the screen with his greasy, grubby fingers before growling through gritted teeth. Bloody thing's not working again. I just shrugged and repeated my question. Did you enjoy your meal? It was fine, he said, still furiously prodding the screen. Tasted a bit funny. Funny? That'll probably be the rat poison I added in, I said, masking my grin with my cup as I took another sip of tea. Hilarious, he quipped. I'm going to restart the router. I held out my hand for him to give me the phone. If I can't get it to work, you're not likely to be able to, are you? He grumbled. He handed me the phone regardless as he stood up, almost losing his balance in the process. Christ almighty, he murmured as he clung to the edge of the kitchen table before slowly sitting back down again. I don't feel so great. He'd gone very pale and was sweating profusely. Well, more than was usual anyway. And I could see in his eyes he could tell something wasn't quite right. I think you need to call me an ambulance, love. Love? Now, it had been many years since he'd used any term of endearment whatsoever, so I knew he definitely wasn't feeling well. Nah, you'll be fine, love. You probably just need a bit of fresh air, love. Oh, maybe just have a little lie down, love. Between his wheezing breaths, he just about barely managed to mutter, a lie down. Yeah, that's a good idea, love. I stayed sat in the kitchen drinking my tea. It was the perfect vantage point to watch as he slowly shuffled out of the door, grasping on for dear life to every and any piece of furniture or counter or radiator he passed on the way in order to keep his balance. I watched as he sluggishly pulled himself up the stairs and disappeared from view, only to reappear moments later as his grotesque, misshapen, flabby body came tumbling back down the stairs, disappearing from view again, before landing with a sudden thump at the bottom. I sat and listened to his last few wheezing breaths, before there was a moment of silence, broken just a short time later by the sound of him breaking wind. Of course, his final and parting audible contribution to the world would be a prolonged wet fart. Vile man. I finished my cup of tea. I got up, turned the router back on, which I'd turned off just after serving him his lasagna. I took the keys out of the freezer where I'd hidden them, and then proceeded to unlock all the doors and windows I'd gone around locking while his lasagna was cooking, just in case he tried to escape or call for help. I let Lucy, our 6-year-old border collie, out of the conservatory where I'd locked her in. She didn't seem too bothered about her walker's dead body splayed out face first at the bottom of the stairs. She just stood there sniffing his bum as I reconnected the landline that I disconnected the same time I would turned the router off, and I called for an ambulance. I think I did a pretty convincing job acting fairly hysterical, but not too over the top, as I told Sarah, the lovely lady at the other end of the call, that my husband had collapsed and fallen down the stairs and wasn't breathing. I had to stay on the line with her as I pretended to administer the CPR procedure she was talking me through, which I could have done without, to be honest. I was rather hoping I could just call for an ambulance and have a little sit down while I waited for it to arrive. It had been a really hectic day. Quite frankly, I was exhausted. I spent all morning perfecting the sequence of events I was going to go through that evening, mapping out all eventualities and making sure I had multiple backup plans just in case. Then I'd spent most of the afternoon making his lasagna. I never laced anyone's food with copious amounts of lethal ingredients before, so I wanted to be sure that I could mask any unusual smells or tastes with strong flavours. I added a ridiculous amount of herbs and 3 tubes of tomato puree to make sure that the overwhelming flavour was tomatoey and herby. I was being overly cautious, of course. It was highly unlikely that he'd have thought that it was anything untoward if it tasted a bit off. The lumpy, disgusting slob just gobbled down whatever was placed in front of him like a pig anyway. It wasn't just the rat poison I'd added in. I'd read online about this woman in America who'd killed her husband with eye drops. So I added some of those in too, along with 4 packets of ground up paracetamol, the rest of the codeine I'd been prescribed for my back, and all the tramadol he'd been taking for an old rugby injury. I also remembered about another woman who poisoned her husband by mixing antifreeze into his drink. So just in case the ingredients in his lasagna didn't do the trick, I had a pot of antifreeze tea brewing for him on the counter just to be on the safe side. I was less convinced he wouldn't taste the antifreeze over the weak taste of tea, so I was rather relieved that the lasagna was enough to finish him off. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Oh, how I cried. I begged Michael, the gorgeous young paramedic who attended, to try again to resuscitate him. There must be something else you can try. He put a very reassuring hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, love. We've done all we can. 3 loves in a single day. I've never been showered with so much affection. They wheeled the bloated whale out on a gurney, which I was surprised didn't buckle under the weight. Shane, the other paramedic, who was a little older and more weathered, but equally as warm and reassuring as Michael, told me I should get some rest and that I could come to the morgue in the morning to start sorting everything out, as there wouldn't be anyone of any importance there right now anyway. I tried my best to act like I was in shock and kept telling both Shane and Michael that I couldn't believe that he was really gone. It's all just so surreal, I kept repeating. Just as they were leaving, Lucy came staggering out of the kitchen, looked up at us, and then collapsed on the hallway floor. I thought I'd planned for just about every eventuality. Like, I deliberately executed my plan on a Tuesday because I knew that nosy cow Christine from across the road would be out at choir practice. Otherwise she'd be straight over sticking her crooked nose in at the first sign of an ambulance. But the one thing I'd entirely forgotten to do was to feed the bloody dog and throw the rest of the lasagna in the bin. Lucy knew very well that she was not allowed to jump up and eat people's food. But feeding her was normally that lazy hippo's job. Being as he was now dead, Lucy didn't get fed that evening and must have been starving. We watched as her legs spasmed and the life drained out of her. I was completely unsure of what to do. This wasn't part of the plan. I considered yelling, "Oh, my poor baby!" But I could see the cogs already turning in Michael and Shane's heads, putting all the pieces together. So I began to consider if I could convince them to drink a huge mug of the antifreeze tea that was still brewing in the pot on the counter. On my way to the police station, I started to wonder what sort of food they served in prison and whether they ever had lasagna. Turns out they do. Every Thursday. I quite like Thursdays.